Welcome to our continuing series, Evenings with Sraddhalu. The last time we discussed the world situation, and you said that you didn't have very comforting news for us. So please continue on with that, and then I want to ask you about a twofold question. Whether you have met any sun-eyed children of a marvelous dawn from 8 years and younger, or in their teens and older.
Subsequent to our discussion last time, I wanted to make a few clarifications. One thing which I had mentioned was that I have not seen any place in the world where this kind of a spiritual turn to the future, to a constructive spirituality that transforms life, exists anywhere in the world, except where there is some connection with Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. And it can be misunderstood, because what I want to explain is there are many spiritual centers. There are many communities, monastics, semi-ascetic, outright ascetic, mixed, which are doing excellent work, which have created spaces of a spiritual concentration, and which inspire people in the millions, even as there are many other centers which are meant to confuse and distract from true spirituality. But my point was, none of them has this affirmative spirituality that aims to transform life. They are monastic, and many of them, if you go to their core and ask them, what about the world situation? You will get a response to this effect broadly. Oh, we have been through bad patches and this too will pass, and one day the spiritual light will emerge. It will happen. When you take that attitude, then you are effectively giving space to the anti-divine forces to invade and seize what you have neglected.
It is tamasic.
It is a kind of it's an ascetic spirituality. If you call that tamasic, yes. It is very active in terms of what it does for its own change. But what it wants to do for the world is, keep on changing yourself and things will happen eventually. And this was the point I had made last time. If we do not have an active pushback, effectively we are giving away the space to the anti-divine forces, to the Asuric or darker forces. And unfortunately, this is the case in most of the world. And I mentioned last time, even in our own communities in the ashram and Auroville, where the Mother set the direction for a positive, affirmative, transformative realization, which would be seeded out into the world. If you see the overall bulk of what's happening, it is largely introspective, passive, and withdrawing. It's not cut off, but in its impact on the world, you do not see any active outreach. The Sri Aurobindo Society centers, which were quite active if you go back 30 years, that generation has passed and the second generation is not there. They did not transmit it to the new generation in a sufficiently living way that they could take the place and grow. Numbers of centers may grow, numbers of memberships may grow, but the active outreach has become actually weaker than it was about, let's say, 30 years ago. So there is a real problem here. And although there are spiritual centers, there is not enough that is affirmative in the way that Sri Aurobindo and the Mother wanted.
But they also say that you have to change yourself before you can begin to change anything else.
Absolutely. And there are some in the ashram who went so far as to say, until you are supramentalized, there's no point attempting anything. Now that puts a very difficult proposition. It's just to take that in the scope of the Mother's or Sri Aurobindo's lives themselves. They should not have started the ashram until they had transformed themselves. Physically, it wouldn't make sense. The point is, Sri Aurobindo already began impacting humanity, not only from an inner level, but externally, even before he had reached what for him was the Siddhi. And having got to that Siddhi, the mother mentions this, until the late 1920s, that is 1929 and 30, Sri Aurobindo had made clear plans that on completion of his supramentalization, he would go out from Pondicherry and work on India's awakening, and had made clear plans for creating many centers all over India for training the youth, equivalent of what is called akhadas, that is gymnasium, literally in the old Greek sense, centers where young people could come and work and build themselves as individuals. And until the late 20s, these plans were very much in place, and he was preparing for that, which would be the physical result of the spiritual sadhana he had built.
But I had read that he and Mother had discussed whether they should be supramentalized first or they should work for the collective.
Yes.
And they chose the collective.
Yes. And you can see how after 1956, the mother began that process of active outreach. Before that, yes, the ashram was in a semi-isolation. But after 1956, once the supramental consciousness was brought in as an active force, the outreach also took form. The society was one of the vehicles, the World Union, Sri Aurobindo's action, numerous such vehicles the mother promoted. Everywhere she saw a possibility, she gave it a full push for that work. If nothing else, to seed these ideas. Maybe you are not the best example, which is fine, but seeding the ideas and assisting other such developing centers. Now you can see the ashram school itself as a center of the formation of a new educational system. How have we been supportive of others who want to do it? There are literally people coming from all over the world saying, we want to implement this, can you help train us? And the ashram school's position is, no, we just have to do our thing, which is fine. Can you not create a vehicle assisting for that work which does not interfere with the ongoing work? All of this was possible. The Sri Aurobindo Society has begun this in a small way relatively recently. But still, in terms of attempt even to reach out, there has not been enough. This was the point I was making. Where there is, it's always connected with Sri Aurobindo and the mother in some way. There are no others who have any vision of a spirituality that will transform life or divinize life.
But now we see that the word of Sri Aurobindo and Mother is spreading all over the world as it never has been before.
With the increase of access through the internet, the dissemination of knowledge has become much easier. And this is the first gift. But still, in relative terms, when you see the mass of humanity, you do not see enough change. And this is where I want to get to the description, which gets a little darkish as happened last time, that in the larger trends that you see in the mass, the decline is so obvious to create an environment that is the very opposite of what the spiritual needs. As an example, you will find in Sri Aurobindo's writings on education, he gives enormous emphasis for the emergence of the psychic and the psychic values and sensitivities, which is the foundation for any spiritual awakening. And he describes art, music and poetry as the perfect education for the soul. Look at what has happened in these three spaces and look at a span of the last 50 years, let's say. And I say 50 years because broadly that's around the time the mother left her body. And do you see any improvement, or even do you see status quo? You see only a sharp decline. And the trend of the decline is getting to greater coarseness, greater insensitivity, greater darkness. And this is what we need to be conscious about. I'm very aware that in saying this, it disturbs people, because it's nice for us, feels convenient to pick areas of change, positive, and say, oh, look, it's happening. But we have to see the full picture and recognize that the change which is happening is in small patches and very small compared to the larger. The trends are so big that these small patches of change are very likely to be overwhelmed by the darkness that surrounds them. And this is my reason for raising this subject. because we need to, and we will get to that later in the discussion, we need to find ways to protect these changes, these centers of light, and that means each one of us, not only individually but in the collective spaces that we are at. And what can we do in a rapidly declining civilizational trend? What can we do to protect the light and even to increase the centers of light and spiritual influence? So just look at the trend in these three things. You're as a musician, what do you see?
Except for the Om choir and some very special musicians who are bringing down touches of the new music, it's a disaster. And it's the worst lower vital vibration in music that I have experienced. I mean, in the 60s, yes, there was a breakthrough, and we had the Beatles and we had other groups who sang of change and sang of interesting things. There's nothing today.
Now, if you see, when the Beatles came, for many from a more traditional context, it was a bit shocking, it was disturbing. Oh, what is this pop music? Lowering, vital, whatever you may say. But it spoke of some ideals. Yes. It pointed to a possibility, and there was some higher idealism in the lyrics. What you see afterwards is, even in the lyrics, not only a loss of idealism, but a deliberate perversion in the lyrics.
Correct.
The lyrics today speak of hate, of conflict, of suffering, of wanting to die, of killing, of destroying, of wanting the whole world to end. So dark that children listening to them may be attracted to a particular crude lilt of music, if I may. I can't even use the word lilt, but some exciting content of the beats or the music. But if the words seeping in are so dark that it's almost as if you could say there's a programming to infect their minds.
The same with video games.
Exactly.
I mean, it's all darkness and war, destruction.
And again, when the start of the video games, we had lots of games which were actually positive adventure games. You could enter fantasy lands, fairy tales. But now it's as if everything has been darkened. Take movies which were inspiring. Let's say Superman, Batman, Spider-Man. Well, even for the more conventional people, those were crude, but what they offered was some kind of heroism. I don't know if you're aware, the mother used to read with avid interest the comics called Phantom, and that used to appear in the Illustrated Weekly, and every week she would want to see the comic strip, and apparently she commented to Panditji that
he's a truly good man.
He's the only selfless man in the world. So what was Superman or Batman or Spider-Man doing? Selflessly protecting others. Now look what's happened. In the last 10 years, they made remakes of all of these. Batman Begins or Superman Origins or something. They've all been darkened, they've all been made crude, coarse, and somehow selfishly ugly. That heroism that you saw it's as if by replacing those movies by the new starts of those stories with a darkened way, you want to erase that past, and the new children now will only grow with these negative images. Where is the selflessness or heroism or courage or beauty or anything uplifting in? So, with a few exceptional movies, you have to see the broad trend.
Yeah, you're right.
And this is what I'm scaring you up with. And I want you to be scared because you have to face this fact. So this is, let's say, music. Most of the music groups which are out there, which have become popular, which have been pushed to the top of the charts. Remember the reference for young people, what's the current hit, what's the current top of the charts. All of them you will find involved in some kind of what they call satanic worship. Literally. They follow some satanic rituals. They have images or symbols of those satanic beliefs brought into their music videos as promotionals for their music. And you see the biggest event in the US in the media is the Super Bowl. Okay, when the Super Bowl takes place, on the break of the Super Bowl is the most expensive slot for advertising, and you have there some kind of a satanic ritual dance. Go back the last 10 years, every time Super Bowl breaks is a satanic ritual dance. Look up on the internet, on YouTube, look up this opening of the longest tunnel in Switzerland. Okay, it was an event which was attended by the heads of state of Switzerland, France, Germany, and a few other European heads of state, all sitting there. And what you see is a macabre demonstration of zombies walking up, dancing, crude, coarse, ugly, obvious satanic symbols. Then Satan himself appears, leads them to destruction of the world, and the whole symbolism is the collapse of civilization and end of time. The clock starts spinning backwards. Everything which you would associate with black magic or dark arts is there represented in the most garish and crude manner and presented as the ideal for the young people.
And almost everything you hear has a very dark beat and very loud beat, which is disturbing to the
mind-numbing and desensitizing. Now the children who have listened to that even for a short time, they come out and then you play for them something which is sensitive or beautiful or uplifting. What's that? Boring. Move on to the next exciting. So they've been already so dulled that by the time they've hit teenage, the damage is done.
Another thing is the volume of this new music. It is so loud.
And now if you're hitting the young people with this kind, look at what you're hitting the adults with when you go to any public space of a hotel where they're playing background music. Can you tell us about that? Your favorite pet grouse, music.
Yes, I have a lot of problem with music because you get in an elevator and you're subjected to it. You can't get away from it. You can't get away from it in the hotel. Almost any place you go, there's music. It's unbelievable. And it's maybe not the darkest, but it's a low common denominator.
Lowest common denominator.
Lowest.
Designed to be as neutral as possible. Meaning what? What is a music which is completely neutral? So if your consciousness is a little on the positive, optimistic side, to bring you to neutrality is to make you insensitive, half sleepy, half hypnotized, and a zombie machine. Intended.
It's true.
Character of music is this monotony and meaninglessness. And now if you're listening to it and it seeps into your mind and consciousness to that degree, now you look at life and life feels monotonous and meaningless.
And it's a repetitiveness also.
Yes.
They have a term, the hook, and there's always a hook that catches the consciousness. And that hook is what people remember and sing over and over and over again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And strangely enough, in the hook will be some negative seed idea, which will then go on as a mantra. Now contrast this with the earlier education where you taught children beautiful songs or mantras which were inspiring, elevating, which stayed with you for life, often defined and inspired you for life. And this is what is being done. Can you believe that this is happening all over the world by chance?
Not at all.
It's being pushed upon you. There's an agenda to desensitize, to drive people into this darkness. And it's so powerful, it's able to reach out through every culture. Now, India, for example, had a huge resistance for a long time to this kind of an assault. And I remember in the early 1990s, 92, 93, there was this whole operation that the US Congress had begun, what they call Super 301, which was described as a lever, a crowbar, to crack open the Indian economy to international influence. Now, it was designed to crack open. And what was the idea of cracking open? You let in a little bit once, and then you have your agents inside the system who will do the rest. What was it? economically to make India dependent to international finances, in the media to tie it into international influences and ownership. Today, all of Indian media is majority owned by agencies outside India, and so they can influence everything that happens. And the third was to invade culturally. Now, with cinema, starting with cinema and music, and hit at the children first and build from there a whole new generation, which is lost, so to say, which is desensitized, disconnected from the soul. Where it has not succeeded is when you have parents who are conscious and protective of the children. Now, when you interact with parents today, the biggest issue you face, how do I protect my children from the media and from these negative influences? Barely 2 weeks ago, I was with some friends in Delhi. Their son, now 14, 15, was going for a send-off party because they had just finished the term, the older students were going away. The children themselves, after the operation in the school where they had a party, they had a party in the evening for which he had to go around 8 o'clock. The party goes on till 2 in the morning. The thing is organized by the children. They have given money. They've hired what they call a farmhouse with huge walls. Nobody can see what's happening inside. They've hired 15 bouncers who will buy alcohol and probably drugs, he didn't say it clearly. And only children, no adults inside. And what else happens, we do not know. And what do you do as a parent when your child says you're going to go to such a party, and if you don't go, then he will be isolated from the group? How do you even prevent it? So I asked them, well, what's happening? They said, the child informs them, all the other children drink alcohol at that age, 15. Most of them have tried out drugs at some point or other. Some of them are into it regularly. And the parents give up fighting because they say, we would rather our children tell us the truth than do it behind our back. So many of the parents have told the children, okay, it's all right if you drink alcohol in front of me, but do not drink outside the house. Now what that has led to is every party that they have, where on their birthday they invite other children, they have alcohol in the house by the parents served to all the kids. And then you complain to the teachers that you're not giving a good education or you're not giving good values in the school. Do you see where this is going? You could not have imagined that humanity would come to this stage, and I'm speaking of India, Delhi, in cultured families. Okay? You could not have imagined this barely 10 years ago. But it's been pushed down literally by an inexorable force, you may say, the system. But behind the system is a force driving the system. Now put this trend, declining trend down. Where is it going in 10 years now, from now? And if you do not see civilizational collapse of human values, forget spiritual values, human values, then you are fooling yourself.
What force or forces are behind this?
Mm-hmm. The big picture we have to see, and the transition is very important to see. The big picture goes back 100 years at least, where you saw these, I'm going to use this word Satanic, as representing people who are in conscious alignment to Asuric forces for their personal benefit. Okay, so Satanic forces trying to seize institutions and then extend their hold on money, on power, essentially these two things. So they created a framework of finance, of which the most obvious form today you see as the US Feds, the Federal Bank, which controls or lends money to the US government. But behind that there's a bigger structure which is called the BIS, Bank of International Settlement, which is the key to the whole hierarchy. Anything happening in the world today involving finance is part of this chain of control. And from there, they can create money, what they call fiat money. So the thing going back 100 years is when they disconnected money from gold. The result was, once you get into this machinery now disconnected from real gold, they can create money at will. And the money they create literally is writing a number on paper now on the computer, can be in enormous, humongous amounts that they lend out, upon which they get interest. It's gone so far that about 10 years ago, now this is statistics I'm giving you which are 10 years old, it's now far worse. The quantum of fake money that's created, against which there is no actual physical material, the quantum of fake money was 6 times higher than the quantum of real money. In other words,
and real money would be gold, diamonds, whatever.
No, in terms of actual money which is backed by gold or some assets,
yes,
okay?
yes.
Which is what we had earlier. Now this fake money, virtual money as they call it, 6 times more means a 20% fluctuation in the stock market is enough to wipe out real worth. So where is all this extra money going? Precisely into these gigantic corporations, multinationals, most of which, as was it Eisenhower who warned of the military industrial complex?
Yes.
In his parting shot when he left the presidency. He was telling us what had already happened. He didn't say, oh, it might happen. He says, this is what we have to be wary of, that this group taking too much power. So from the finances, they got into the military. And the transition point where we can say we lost, that is the good side lost, was just after the Second World War. When they entrenched themselves into all over the world, globally, got inside the US in particular, and got into what became then the multinational structures. And that's around the time when we saw the decision that Sri Aurobindo had to take to leave his body. And the mother explained it in very cryptic terms, and most people don't understand what she meant when she said something like, the situation had become so difficult that all the anti-evolutionary forces had ganged up against him to his physical presence. And for him to continue in the body would have literally blocked the forward movement. He had to leave for that reason. Now, what does that mean? What's she saying? This is in the agenda.
Yes.
What was that? And you see, the system had been entrenched by these powers. And Sri Aurobindo left only because he saw now that thing for which he was working was not going to happen. Or it had been postponed significantly. It was not going to happen in his immediate time.
Unless he leaves his body.
Well, it's not that he needs to leave his body, it's that it's not going to happen. You remember when I was asked, why would you leave the body? He said only 3 reasons. One is either it is shown to him that the work is not to be this time, or accident or completion of work or something like that. These are 3 reasons he gave. But this was the point. It was not accident. It was not that he had completed. Supermind had not yet been established. Physically, I mean. In the mind, yes, in the vital, even in the subtle physical of his body, it had been transformed, but the physical was not done. And so it was shown not to be this time. And it was the reason why he left. The mother then, and they worked together from that, working from above to create the link to bring down the supermind. And all of this is to show you the entrenched power has gone so deep today that they control literally everything from their control of power structures. So you control the banks, you control the industry, the multinationals, and the beauty of the multinational structure is you are answerable to nobody. You span nations, you can do what you like, where you like, and if this country doesn't allow it, you go into another country to do it and feed it back into the first country. Like Apple, although everybody thinks of Apple as a US-based company, when you buy an Apple phone, it will say designed in California, that's all, manufactured in China. Where are the headquarters of Apple? In Ireland. Because in Ireland, they don't have to pay taxes if they are not the bulk of their profits are not being produced there. Some technicality about where the headquarters is located and where the profits are. So what the US was lacking, they got in Ireland. What Ireland was lacking, they got in the US. And what neither had, they got in China. And so somehow you are bypassing all the systems, whereas the common man is stuck within the systems and the rules which are created to control the common man. Now look what's happening since that time, after the Second World War. Till then you had the conventional idea of a family. The father went for work, mother looked after children, education was reasonably affordable, you could go all the way through and get a job and have a stable life. From that point on, gradually there's a squeeze on the money until you cannot even live unless both parents are working. They brought it to that point. Suddenly now the children are sitting at home alone while both parents are working. Meanwhile, the nuclear family was promoted as an ideal, so grandparents were not there. You've left the children alone. What do you do next to the children? Well, you put them into some activity where they are now open to any kind of programming, free of the parental influence. You see, and this is a frustration because you don't have a choice. The system has been squeezing you. And where earlier two people working gave you a comfortable life, today it's reached a point where two people working barely gives you just enough to survive. Why? Because either taxes are increasing or interest rates are increasing or the prices are going up, but you are being squeezed and squeezed and squeezed until you have become effectively a slave.
You mentioned last time a cabal. Are these international figures?
Yes. The way it works is right at the top, the people who control these structures and who actually decide the policies which lead to these results of enslaving humanity. They are all into certain practices of Satanism of some kind. And it is their, let's say, stamp of identity. They do not allow a new person into their network if they are not part of that system. And it gets very dark. I don't want to speak about those things because it gets too dark, but it involves doing some of the worst inhuman things possible. Why they do that? On a very practical level, by getting people to participate in their rituals which include some form of human sacrifice. By getting people to participate into that, you have a point of blackmail to control them, but also you've tested them for the inability to have any human sensitivity. So they dehumanize you as you go up the chain, and the more you fit into their sociopathic tendencies, the more they accept you into the higher circles. Now, there's a very important series of interviews which is done by one of those who went up the chain, and somewhere along the way he broke. He said, I can't do it. And he broke out of the system and then came out to speak of what was actually happening behind the scenes. You'll find the interviews online, and it is a person, the name will come back to me, but the person was from Netherlands, and he was part of that higher structure. And then he has spoken in his interviews of what they were doing, what the systems of control are, and things like that. The point I'm getting at is, right at the top, it is a dark satanic influence. And because that's the structure, they seep down with that objective for all humanity. The increase of poisons in the food is by design from the top to pollute, to damage humanity. Again, aiming at children first. You start by feeding them junk foods right at the beginning, and then you hook them for life and into bad habits of various kinds. You start by introducing in their textbooks perverse ideas. Now, it's happening in, for example, California, which is one of the most progressive states in many ways, that the laws they have passed to teach children in kindergarten that you can choose to be a boy or a girl. They call it gender fluidity. You can choose. You are not one or the other. Your biology doesn't matter. It's what you decide to be. And then they passed a law saying the school is not allowed to tell the parents that they have changed their gender. And to assist them, they have to pretend to be someone of the opposite gender. Now, this is all in kindergarten stage.
But what is the idea behind it?
The idea was to create a confusion of identity.
No. How they motivate it? I mean, what is it there to not having any gender? This you can choose.
To create a confusion of identity. To create confusions at a level where you don't even know who you are, and you become then part of the machinery. Now, if you see, the practical result was barely a few years ago, at the end of the previous US president, there was this huge controversy in the country about allowing transgenders to use bathrooms of their choice. Now in England, they passed a law that says you can self-select what is your gender and go into whichever bathroom you decide. It's so ridiculous. It's so impractical. And yet, nobody is talking the practical reality that bathrooms are designed for biology and not psychology. So why should your psychological shift be an issue here? And nobody is saying it. And so, when you look at these kinds of perversions introduced at school level, and the way the media promotes it as something good, fashionable, politically correct, that scares you. So many of the conscious parents say, I don't want to put my children into public school because of these weird values that are being drilled in. But nobody is asking, where do these weird values come from? Why are they being promoted? And again, it goes back to an agenda to subvert humanity. So we looked at music briefly, look at art. Again, the last 50 years, if you see the decline. Just to give one last example for the musical space, all the big names that you see, which are projected as icons for the children. What's the current hot names? Beyonce, who are the other ones? I'm not so much in the know. But look at these names. When they became popular, what was the skill they demonstrated that put them at the top of the charts? The lyrics, nothing special. The singing, nothing special. They all use this tuners. You know what that is? If you cannot hold pitch correctly, you have the mic going through a digital device that corrects your pitch. So you can sing off tune, and it will be digitally corrected live as you sing. Now they are all using that, which means what's their actual skill of voice? Nothing. What are they being put on the top of the charts for? Sexy moves. Huh? They're projected as sex idols practically. Basically. Yes. And the gyrating dances they create. But even that, do you think others couldn't do it? Why was this person selected and made a top of the chart star? And this is the question, when you ask this, that starts the process of realization that no, they were selected by a group of directors or producers or distributors that chose, let's make this the next star, and they put them there on top of the charts because they control the whole machinery. Meanwhile, you see in your school, in your home, in even public spaces, on the internet now, people of much higher competence, much greater skill, much more uplifting, inspiring, both in lyrics, in voice, in dance, in everything. They'll never get to the top. And you have to ask why. If truly the system was for assisting the best examples to come up. And when you speak to a group of parents, you pick 100 parents, and I'm speaking this having spoken to literally thousands of parents. And you ask them, well, how do you explain that this is what comes up as the example of, let's say, music or cinema or as popular? Well, we are told everybody wants this, but we don't want it. Now, I ask you, all of you, can you say, I wanted it? Do you know anybody who actually wants it? No. And yet the excuse given in the media is everybody wants it. That's what the majority wants. And the media is only catering to the majority. And nobody I know in my whole life has ever said, yes, I want it. So this excuse is fake. It's actually being drilled upon you without your choice, against your will.
It's the same with the news.
Exactly. Everybody I know who watches the news says things like, it's sickening, it is so dark, it is... But, so I say, why is it being put out there? I ask people in the industry, in the news industry, I have friends who are inside the system, oh, but that's what sells. Is it true? If you had a choice, wouldn't you watch something more elevating and beautiful? Everybody says yes, but we don't have a choice. And the practical evidence for this is, what do you do when you're watching TV? You keep flipping channels looking for something you want to watch which will be worthwhile, and you don't find it. Most people, other than one or two exceptional programs or a few exceptional channels, but they don't give you current news, they don't tell you what's really happening in the world. And so there's very clearly a dumbing down which is being imposed on the people. And you have no power because they control the full system. It's all been entrenched in their power structures. I mentioned last time the Mockingbird, Project Mockingbird of the CIA to control the public narratives of media, which in the 1991 had reached more than 80-90% across. Now it's complete, the hold is complete. So music, art, we look at, again the similar decline. We need not go into details, but just look at the fact that the biggest artists today who are promoted with the biggest sales of their, I don't want to call art, their paintings or drawings, going for millions of dollars, are beaten by my local kindergarten child's skill, in most cases. Isn't it? Your children have far better skill of art than what you see being sold up there for very high prices. Why is that?
But it's the darker things that they probably...
The themes are all dark.
All dark.
Only the Halloween parties in the UK, terrible. I would always keep myself away, and they would just eulogize and glorify it. It's a terrible force even in the UK.
Yes, yes. And it's being brought into India. This Halloween party, which in the US was popularized. Again, it was not the norm. Was it so in your childhood?
No, it was much milder. It began with All Saints' Day. That was the meaning behind Halloween. And we would go out to different families and they would give little treats.
It was fun.
It was fun.
Light fun.
What is Halloween?
It's a... Can you explain what it is?
Halloween is a festival of All Souls' Eve. And it's sort of celebrated by the children going to different houses and the people give candy and things like that.
And now it has become...
But there's the idea of people who are dead being remembered or coming back? Is that the
I
idea?
don't know.
So now the interesting thing is, so nobody I ask can actually say what it represents.
No more.
For that you have to read up some text, but what you read and what's being done is totally unconnected.
Yes.
Like this.
Yes.
We're having fun, that's all.
Yeah.
And you go around trick or treat.
Not
But
just that,
the
now-
dress they wear
Yeah, that's it.
is ugly,
Terrible.
gaulish, somehow representing the black magic, dead people, witches.
Yeah.
The more ugly, the more successful you are.
Yes, exactly.
That's the strange thing.
And that said, and all of these
Yes,
things,
yes,
yes.
Yes. And it's literally all the things you would associate with a satanic ritual now being popularized for children. This is the strange part.
Yeah, that's what.
And they all dress up in satanic and ugly.
They would even have those pumpkin themes, you know, how
Exactly, yes,
those
yes.
were pretty. and
Those are
beautiful.
pretty.
Now I've seen, like I went in 2010, this time I went in 2015, so over the 7 years I see a change. It has become worse.
And the strange thing is you ask, why are you doing this? Why are you wearing those clothes? Well, that's the norm. That's the day you're supposed to do it. And it's just
Uniform.
nobody thinks about. And now it's being brought into India.
I see.
Yeah, and not just that, even I think you should talk about, I mean, whenever you get the time, this gay rights and all of these things. Subramanian
Yes.
Swami said that we don't want this, these are American habits.
Right. It gets into a very touchy space. If I make a statement about it now, the consequences 10 years down will be this guy will be labeled anti-gay. Okay? And
Or a few years.
well, a few seconds down. People have been thrown out from public spaces because they made a casual comment which seemed, even in the nuanced way, to be criticizing some exaggeration of gay rights. Okay?
Good
This in
people.
America.
Good people
Good people
in America,
have
but
been put out of
that's the norm.
office.
That's become the norm. To somehow, and see the form again, the perversion it takes. A teacher comes into classroom and announces to children, I am Miss so-and-so and I am lesbian.
Yeah, that's a trend. It's
Why did you need to announce that?
Yeah.
I eat meat, did you need to announce that? I have such and such religion, you didn't have to announce that. Why did you need to announce sexual orientation in the middle of a classroom for children? And it's the norm. It's become somehow you are celebrated for having come out of the closet. You're somehow more special than a normal person who is now abnormal because this is the norm. Wait, it gets worse. I don't know if I mentioned this last time. In any of the award structures for cinema or writing of novels, the award guidelines say you must have a gay or transgender role in the drama to qualify for the award, and it must not be nominal. Their gay identity should play a significant role in the story. Otherwise, you won't qualify for the award. Now, the moment you've done this, what happens? It seeps back to all your writers. Anyone aspiring for an award now will do this. What's the statistic in the US? The total LGBTQI XYZ list community is less than 4% in the US alone. And to give this dramatic place not only to that identity, ideal, or in some of it is perversion, into public space and impose it on the rest of the 96% as something normal, and for the 96% to feel abnormal and somehow inferior.
Yeah.
That's the reversal of values. And to such a degree that this is told to me by someone, and this is I found in the US equally true. This is someone in academia in Europe at a very senior level who says today you will not get anywhere in academics unless you are either gay or non-white or non-male. The big target today is the white male hetero. You are somehow to be knocked out because you have dominated or misused your power or whatever. The whole thing somehow builds around control and power. Huge number of studies. Every time I meet somebody who is in the social studies college level, I ask them, what are you doing? And it goes into gender studies or rights of deprived communities. And you have to actually look for a deprived community and split society into slots of deprivation and promote them, their rights. And suddenly what do you notice? You have large numbers of NGOs pushing for rights of XYZ sub-communities which never saw themselves as separate. For the centuries of deprivation and denial of your rights, fight for them. And suddenly you find 10 different subgroups now fighting each other for rights.
Creating disharmony.
Exactly. To control. Divide
Yes.
in order to control and have everybody fighting. And this is the strange part. The identity has been split up at such an early age. Why? Because then you can control people more easily. And it's part of that larger agenda. I know what I'm saying will be a little disturbing, but in saying it, the first step is accomplished, you're conscious of it, you'll start noticing it. If you don't notice it, you will not know why things are going wrong, you'll be helpless. When you notice and can identify the elements of the distortion, you can not only identify but now insulate yourself, which is the whole goal of this discussion. To be able to protect ourselves.
But Sraddhalu, just one thing.
Yeah.
Of course, this is a conscious agenda. But don't you think, in a very unconscious manner, there is a manifestation in the US, in America particularly, the school shootings, the kids are involved in, and they cannot control it anymore. Innumerable instances that have come up over the last 1 decade, you can see that US school shootings. So how are they are not able to control it?
Yes. It's interesting that you raise this. I will briefly touch upon it. Unfortunately, it will not do justice to the whole question. But the US statistic going back about 5 or 6 years was that every 4th school had at least one gun-related incident of a child bringing a gun to a school or having a shooting or whatever. But what is interesting to see is all the children who picked up guns and shot, or went to school to shoot others, all of them you can trace back to a disturbed psychiatric condition, often associated with listening to these kinds of perverse music or playing some of these perverse games of shoot up. Most of them were in some kind of therapy and had almost been driven to that condition by the current social context or the things we've been discussing, which are pushing down or spoiling perverting the youth. None of them came from a normal person who was frustrated. They were all in a psychiatric condition already. This is important to recognize. So now, if you look at New York, more than 50% of the children in elite schools are on certain drugs which are intended to reduce your excitability or hyperactivity or whatever it is. And now those drugs, because the information is available on the internet, in India we find children accessing those drugs as a way of improving performance in school. And these are psychiatric drugs. They have on some level the effect of calming you, but on another level there are other effects which are extremely harmful. One of the side effects is to dull your emotions. You lose sensitivity, you become more distanced from empathy and things like that. And if this is being given in larger and larger numbers, what are you recognizing? Society has been driven to sickness. Human society on a mass scale is in a rapid decline and has reached a stage of neurosis already, in the US in particular, but that as a reference for the rest of the world, it's happening everywhere.
Let us continue
Okay.
this in our next session.
Yes.
Thank you.